Hi everyone. Um, Habaragani, KUUMBA. KUUMBA is creativity. So, today's day 6 spread is actually being done on day 7. So today is actually New Year's Day, January 2021. And it is evening, and I'm only just now getting to both of my spreads for Kwanzaa yesterday and Kwanzaa today. Yesterday was a busier day than what I had anticipated. Um, I really thought I was going to have plenty of time to put towards this, and it ended up not being the case with various different things happening, including about an 8-hour span of time in which I was involved with a fundraising effort for New Year's Eve for Tara Mandala. So that was one that required a lot of presence, and then just trying to get everything, little things here and there that really, really had some urgency to them in terms of welcoming the new year in. Getting those put into place felt really important, actually. Um, and I really had to do them. Things like big piles of recycling that just have to be out. I don't want to bring in the new year with the trash, with trash in the house. Um, there were food, preparing food, being in touch with family members, and the things, that we do. So, and I've now got 5 fur babies. So, one of whom is severely disabled at this point. My big dog Noah is, I don't know what exactly is wrong with him. We know some of it's arthritis. Um, and it happens with large dogs that get older. They can start to have issues with their back legs, and Noah does. And he's still very enthusiastic and happy, and excited and all of that, but it's a lot. It's a lot. So, um, in and amongst all of that, I'm here. I figured better late than never. It was still very much with me yesterday, very much with me as a reflection about creativity. And I think looking at the prompt, I feel like today's prompt of KUUMBA, or day 6's prompt, I should really say, this is one, centering this away from a very white way of taking it in is extremely helpful in terms of looking at creative energy and creativity and what we do with it. Because when I think of creativity, I immediately begin to think in terms of my artwork. And what this spread told me, by using, Courtney Alexander's deck, the Dust to Onyx, which I worked with at the beginning, it centered the whole discussion, as I had hoped, from a much more we'll say from a different perspective, right? I can't say for 100% that it's much more of a perspective that centers on an African community or community of African diaspora, but it definitely is not a white perspective, let's put it that way. And I find that incredibly useful in terms of what I'm about to share. So I've already drawn my cards. I've spent the time, reading the book and the meanings, which I've marked. That's what all my little markers are here, so that I can be a little bit more succinct about sharing it, because I can really tend to overshare, and that's not always particularly useful. And I don't want to spend the next 4 hours, editing videos. Honestly, that's a big part of it. So, yeah. So the first prompt reflects on, what your special area of creativity is. And to my surprise, it's the Justice card. And I feel like I could boil it down after reading Courtney's meaning for this card to being about truth and seeing the truth, seeing both sides to something, and then being willing to absolutely look at what is the truth here. But then I think, and that's, I wouldn't have thought of that actually as being a particularly creative pursuit. But when I contemplated on that a little further, I realized it actually really is. When I contemplate on the truth and I contemplate on taking in, two sides to a particular issue, it's not an uncommon thing that it takes time. It requires writing, spending time, sometimes making artwork, but really deeply looking, and being with something at a very, at an uncomfortable level. I mean, you can't take in truth and not be uncomfortable. Truth is often extremely uncomfortable. And I tend to be drawn to the truth because I want to know it. I don't like to be lied to. I don't want to live in ignorance. I don't want to live in, in a state of bias. And so looking at truth in general is necessary for everything, really, for everything. And it's also it's in part here about responsibility. I mean, Courtney is very clear in the book that justice is about fairness, clarity, karma, and balance. Yeah, and she mentions bias. So the dormant aspect of it is injustice, bias, inequality, and it's fickle. And fickleness is not something I'm very good at tolerating. Yeah. She writes, justice stands guard at the center of our lives, weighing the decisions we make and bringing us to the awareness of how we deal with the imbalances in our lives. Yeah. So let's see. There was something she wrote here. When justice shows up, be ready to take responsibility for your words, actions, and projections, whether emotional or intellectual. Seek the truth that comes from source instead of simply relying on collective biases to make your decisions or form your judgments. The good we do or receive does not always reflect fairly in the world. Wherever there is a winner, there also exists a loser. We all attend to the same source. Use higher guidance to bring your life and relationships back into a state of equilibrium. Justice can be very intense, but if we walk in truth and clarity, we find the paths we choose to be clearer and brighter. Which I also find to be true. I'm just going to go shut the door. Tom just came down and is playing a podcast while I'm doing something very deep and reflective. Okay, so yeah, when I looked at that, I mean, once I looked at what justice meant in this context, I could start to see the rest of the spread, which will unfold which will unfold, was easier to take in. I could understand the meanings a lot more easily. It's in part, the area of creativity is finding the way to dance with that truth and with receiving that, receiving spiritual truth and then finding the way to live within it. And that, of course, is a completely creative process that requires flexibility, adaptability, adjustment, all of it. And I really would never have thought of that as being a particularly, a creative thing, or even special, to be honest. As in special area of creativity. So that was very enlightening. Card 2 and prompt 2, how I currently express my creativity. 5 of Gourds. this is one of the first cards I drew from this deck, or one of the first that I remember reading the meanings for. Let's put it that way. It's such a beautiful way of honoring the grief and the experience of grief. And again, I'm going to read from the book because I won't, my summaries won't do justice to what Courtney has written. Her words speak better on behalf of what she intends, I think. So she writes here, loss and disappointment are integral parts of our experience, of our existence, yet still leave us feeling hollow and defeated. Suffering is something none of us is a stranger to. Yet while the milk is spilled, there are always cups left to be filled. We have the opportunity to accept. I'm going to just change hands here, because I think my microphone's on this side. Let's see. We have the opportunity to accept what is, so that we can take time to make good use of what is left behind. This way, we always find value and meaning to our suffering, as difficult as it may be to understand. The Five of Gourds illustrates this suffering through self-mutilation. This card is inspired by the Dani of Papua, Indonesia, who cut off portions of their fingers when in mourning. When a member of the community passes on, it's believed that those especially powerful will linger, so a portion of the finger is offered to keep them at bay. It's also symbolic of the pain of losing a loved one. It is said that the hands are related to life, the community, and the universe, that we are all connected. Hands are weakened as fingers are lost, just as the community weakens when a valuable member leaves this world. The practice of finger cutting may seem extreme to us. However, what we learn from this is to feel the pain so that we can move forward into a space of healing. So what I take from so it might be very easy to say then, okay, well, like, what does that have to do with how you express creativity? If the creativity that I'm working with is about seeing truth, right? Is about, unpicking biases, untangling, disentangling, multiple narratives that all have tremendous gravity and influence in order to find truth, to see truth, my truth, the truth, universal truth, collective truth, spiritual truth, universal truth. It means doing a lot of being with suffering, my suffering, the suffering of others, the pain of loss, recognizing how the pain of someone else's loss hurts me, and creates pain inside of me. How the I'm struggling to verbalize this one. How the pain that someone else experiences can disable us. Not maybe directly, right? But it can be very, very disabling. There was something I read or came across very recently in the last couple of days about how pain, when seeing someone else in pain, is often registers as being more painful than being in pain ourselves. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot, and holding, being able to hold. I never thought. Well, I'm processing so much stuff as I'm trying to speak, but it brings to mind a lot of stuff, and some of it is about, if this is the creativity, being able to find a way to be creative enough on that level to move, to work with my own pain and suffering enough that I can create space to take in pain and suffering of others, and then manage that in addition to my own, I think that is a creative act. that is a creative act, because there's some ability to transform it in the process. And this is a big, wow, I just now realized that's a large part of the, wow. Big stuff. Big stuff here. So a lot of the practices that I do right now, that are to do with, I've spoken a couple of times about her, about Machi Glabdron. Okay, it comes back to this same quote, carry the load of appearing conditions, right? Carry the load of appearing conditions. If you don't carry the load of all phenomena, the remedy of peace and happiness can't liberate you. Right? If we don't find a way to be with pain that arises and emerges, which is itself, I would say, a highly creative act. I would never again have thought of it this way, but again, decentering from white experience, right? Which is not going to tell me that. This is definitely not white experience. Machik was Tibetan. This is a deck that is coming from non-white experience. Decentering from that, suddenly, aha, this is creativity, right? This is a way of using life force, life energy, life inspiration in a way that makes a big difference in my life and hopefully in the lives of others, because we're all connected. But this is a big part of the work that I do, in my practices with Chud, with Machik, with her teachings. And there's so much there. It's hard to really take in a lot of her teachings right now, because I'm just processing how do I work with what I know already. But yeah, being with that. And I think too, there's a certain creativity in transforming your own pain and difficulty so that it can be offered to others, as a way of sharing, as a way of validating someone else's pain, someone else's loss, or of living in such a way that others can see, like, you can be in a lot of pain and find a way that there's a way through it. And the way through it doesn't mean spiritual bypassing, right? It doesn't mean that you go back to being all, peace and happiness and love and light. You have to be in it. So that was a lot. So position 3, how my creativity honors my ancestors. Again, would never have contemplated this. Definitely not a white-centric approach. Little staff. The meaning behind this one really struck me. And again, I'm gonna come back to Courtney, because she's gonna say it better than I can. So I'm gonna skip around here, because the court cards have more detail. They have a full 2 pages of text, unlike the other cards in the deck, and it's all really rather wonderful. So Courtney writes, just as a phoenix rises from the ashes, Little Staff understands that flying high requires a fearless knowing and acceptance of their whole being. They seek transformation and purification of the soul, releasing all fear of uncertainty and ephemerality, leaving behind old habits, and healing the old wounds that create restriction and limitation. They courageously shine light on even the darkest parts of themselves and face them head on. There's a lot more here. Obviously, that was most of one paragraph, and not all of it, but that, honors that creativity, that way of everything I've just described, honors my ancestors, because it's healing their lineage at the same time. When you use your creativity to seek the truth, to uncover all of the pain, when you uncover your own pain, the problem is, and this is, again, it's an ancestral deck. It links in, right? So even though, this is not coming from white ancestry, it doesn't matter. It's just like, as um, just like when a person of color uses a deck that's all white, it in its own way, because they've been doing it forever, it doesn't matter, right? Just like when you're reading a book, and for hundreds of years, books have all been written from a male perspective. So if you're not male and white and you still manage to identify with the main character, it's because you're creative. It's because you've learned to be creative, right? Um, so that I love being in that position, because I want that as part of this, and as part of truth. But when you start digging into your own pain really deeply, you start to, it's pulling the thread in the sweater. You pull one thread and think, oh, it's only one thread, I'll just pull this off and it'll be done. And before you know it, you've pulled most of the sweater out. you know you begin to see that all of the pain that you're experiencing is not just yours. So much of it is inherited. These patterns of behavior that we have, they're not just ours. They extend back in time through our families. And you can begin to see where they attach here, where they attach there. And I've untangled a lot of them just through recognizing how these things played out with my mom, and my grandmother, and then my grandmother and her mother. And so that chain of forgiveness, of acceptance and understanding, kind of depersonalized a lot of the suffering and pain that I have, or that I had to work through, with my family of origin. And when you start to realize it's not just you, they've all suffered tremendously. And the ways that they've suffered, it shifts things, and it makes it possible maybe to let it go, because it stops being anything to do with you, really. You still have a lot of work to do, but it doesn't make it quite as painful. Or it didn't for me, I should say. I don't know what it would be for someone else. My experience was that doing that, and continuing to do that, because it seems like a never ending process, but it's worthy. It's a worthy process. It's not a process I regret, but I forget that doing that benefits my ancestors, because it heals and recognizes that pattern. It awakens in them through time. They feel it. There's a possibility to almost time travel and journey through them and with them. And they know that they're seen, they know they're understood, and something starts to heal. Something starts to heal. Yeah. Big stuff. I didn't know I was going to be going here. You just don't. And then you're in. So position 4, how my creativity promotes unity. Again, really humbling. Again, I wouldn't have thought of this, but this deck has such a wonderful voice. So it came up as young coin. I'm always so moved by how beautiful this deck is. And the eyes, I should say too, when there are eyes on these people cards, they come from real people. And Courtney will tell you why in great detail she chose that person, and what qualities it is in that person that are being brought here. She definitely refers, she does with several of them, with the people cards, with the court cards, but with this one in particular, she refers to young coin as a they. So as a gender, non-binary, gender neutral individual. Let me see. So the eyes in young coin are from Misty Copeland, who's a ballerina. And the quote that she offers, that Courtney offers here from Misty, is, "Success is not easy, and I think everyone should know that hard work and perseverance and being open to giving back are so much more powerful than stepping all over people to get to the top." Young coin is the air of earth, combining the intellectual mind with focus, discipline, and the means to build. Young coin has an incredible focus, is meditative, and is fully present in whatever task they're involved in. They are simultaneously able to multitask, engaging all of their senses to increase awareness and reception of the information that their environment offers them, making them very keen and stoic observers. They use their ingenuity to seek out uncommon ways to do things, which is why they make great managers and engineers. Like a mountain climber, they steadily and carefully work towards reaching the top while braving the harsh conditions of the psyche. Young coin will push through physical pain as well as mental insecurities that would stall their success, which also makes them very great for any fields that require intense physical training. Young coin is very loyal and family oriented, which is very true. Yeah, they can be overly conservative and slow to change. They must be mindful of their stubborn and fixed ideologies. These are true. These are totally true. They may miss out on the exciting pleasures of life that can only be enjoyed when they come back down from their high place. I would say that is something I have to be aware of. Definitely. But how my creativity promotes unity, I'm really present. I think it's saying, by being meditatively present and focused on, the realities and enduring, being willing to endure, staying loyal. Yeah, combining the intellectual mind with focus, discipline, and the means to build. Being multitasking and being fully present. So that was a really a lot of that is what I do. Definitely what I'm doing when I'm being a doula. Which I would never have thought of as being creative either. It's definitely how I was working when I was a theater director. Yeah, yeah. Again, she goes into a depth for the court cards that I've never seen anywhere else from another deck creator, and it's remarkable. So, let's see. How my creativity beautifies my community. This one was a little bit of a surprise. The Tower. I think we're getting an idea, right, on where a lot of this is going. There's a common theme that runs through all of these cards together that really does string them together deeply. So the Tower, I think it's about how does it beautify the community? Well, the Tower beautifies the community by seeing what's good, by seeing, I think it's about seeing what's good, seeing what's pure, seeing what is being purified, pointing out the beauty of what happens when something, when an old structure is being torn down and it's possible for a newer one to emerge. It may emerge in a very different way than we expect, but there is beauty in that. Being truthful about what's happening and how it's happening. Let me see let's look. I don't, it's not that I don't feel like my interpretations are valid. It's that the way that Courtney writes about it and the way, everything comes together here is it's uncanny. And it's just better than how I could explain it myself. Yeah, so let's see. The revelations. Truth, like a divine hammer, breaks up everything we thought we knew of ourselves. Okay, when the divine hammer comes down, we are helpless against its whirlwind of change. What we do have the ability to control is whether or not we land gracefully on our feet through wisdom and adaptability. The divine winds come back around even harder to completely clear out all that we tried to resist. If we take time to step back and center ourselves, we will see the tower for the beautiful storm it is. With all the destruction and chaos the tower brings, the resulting aftermath provides a much needed peace. All have been cleared away, and what is left is a new opportunity to build a life more suitable to the truth we now walk in. Yeah. This is a beautiful way she wrote this. She says the tower can bring about intense changes, but don't worry. Though that destruction can be as difficult as losing a longtime job or home, it can also be as beautiful as finding a deep, fulfilling love that sweeps you out of your tower of loneliness. It's a time of illumination and realization. Yeah. It's just, she writes with such she's so poetic, but yet pragmatic. I love the way she writes. Yeah, this is it. I think it's being willing. I feel, and the tower is about liminal space. I've been living in a space certainly for the last several years, and I seem to choose it in some way. One where things around me are perpetually being torn down and broken, um, and yet something new is emerging from that, and that happens a lot. And I think maybe, both in terms of the community at large as it changes, life as we know it, certainly over the last year has changed. I guess, maybe the creativity that I bring that beautifies is the willingness to, yeah, is just to continue to walk in truth and center myself within it. Um, yeah, I mean, just continue this journey, right, through this creativity, of being willing to see truth, of finding truth and working with it rather than against it. And you can't. It's all of this is going with the flow of the truth, as painful as it may be. It's humbling to see it laid out like this in truth. It's incredibly humbling. Um, So, 6, how my creativity benefits my community, is the 9 of Gourds. So, again, this might be the only card that I've struggled with in terms of trying to understand it better. I've never looked quite so deeply at the image. But in the book, Courtney refers to this being at the center of this card as Anansi, who's a spider. And I have some really deep connections with spiders. It was not, I'm pretty sure it was not Anansi, but I mean, I suppose it could have been. But I did have a being, a deity of some kind that came to me in a dream maybe 15 years ago and was trying to hand me a spider. Continually kept, and said at a certain point, the only way that she could get me to take it was to put it in my hand and change the way it looked, so it looked like a fuzzy, cute spider, you know. And it was as big as my hand. I mean, it was huge. And she said, "You have to take this." And I mean, it was transformative. And I went from being an arachnophobe who can't stand or sit, I can't sit in a room, I couldn't sit in a room if I knew there was a spider somewhere in the room, to being someone, my ears would ring. The phobia was so bad I could hardly breathe. Literally, hardly breathe. My ears would ring. I'd have to get out of the house. I would go crazy. Um, and I went from being like that to being, let's put it this way, I live in a house right now with a pet tarantula as big as my hand, okay, named Karen Agatha. She and I are the only female animals in the house of any kind. So there's something in that. There's something in that. This Anansi creature here has this gourd, and is pouring out into all of the other gourds. I mean, Anansi is a trickster. That's not always a bad thing. I mean, tricksters can trick you, but you learn lessons. And tricksters can also, they may change the way that you're seeing something. So supposing, let's make believe for a moment that the deity or the entity that I saw was, or that came to me was Anansi, right? Anansi had to change their appearance so that I would be willing to, not just the spider, but because the actual deity appeared, not just the spider, right? The person came carrying a spider, but changed their physical appearance so that I could actually see them, and made it clear that they were relating to me based on that vision, but without that vision, without being tricked into taking that spider, I would never have overcome my arachnophobia. So I don't know how that benefits my community. Maybe I trick people into seeing their worth, or seeing something of value, or present, maybe it's just sharing those blessings, right? All of these gourds are being filled by Anansi. So maybe there is a blessing, by sharing the blessings that are in my gourd. No pun intended. I'm thinking about in my head, as the gourd. But, by sharing that process, maybe that's the blessing. I don't know. But I'll be sitting with this for sure. I'll be sitting with this. Yeah. And I may have to celebrate. I'm realizing as I do this, it's so deep, that I may be celebrating Imani faith, tomorrow, because this is a lot. This is a lot. And I actually want to sit with it and be with it appropriately. Okay. So, 9 of gourds. And then finally, 7. So as I shuffled, the deck wanted to speak to me in its own way. It wanted to select cards its own way, and so I worked with jumpers this time, because this deck doesn't want to work with my system. It works with its own, which I'm fine with. Let's see. 7 is, how can I be more creative? So this was, again, very humbling. So the creativity, again, that we're talking about is one of justice as truth, balancing of perspective and perception, and through this creative journey of healing and purification, and I mean, all of it, offering, then this is heavy, it's deep, it's beautiful. So the emerging one, and again, I feel like I'll read Courtney's words here because they're better than mine. Probably should have done that for Anansi as well, or for the 9 of gourds as well, but here we are. Okay, so yeah, so the emerging one, the awakened qualities, new birth, faith, innocence, and purity, dormant naivety, rashness, foolish, frivolous. All of those I'm capable of all of those on any day of the week. Then she writes, take a moment to really connect with the energy of the emerging one. They are pure soul with just a faint twinkle of new light in their eyes. On their forehead is the receptor that continuously guides the emerging one throughout their journey. The purple amethyst acts as a receiver of information from the spirit realm, other dimensions, and the energy fields that abound. It is the unconscious guide of which the emerging one will someday become aware, making it one of their most powerful tools. Awareness is the key to their survival. So I feel, this is, how can I be more creative? I've got to continue to come back to that place. I'm on the journey. It's the beginner's mind. One of my favorite quotes that will always live with me from my Zen experience comes from, not from one of my teachers actually, and not from a Korean teacher, but from a Japanese teacher. And I'm trying to make a video, so I naturally am going to struggle to remember their name. But the quote, and it's one of the few that I remember and can actually quote because I'm terrible with remembering words. But, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. And, that really resonates with me. I should have said who it is. It's Suzuki Roshi. Suzuki Roshi. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. I think that, keep continuing to think in terms of, I'm just discovering this. I'm just finding out about this. I'm just, to look at everything with fresh eyes. It's a beautiful way to go through life. And that is ultimately what the practice of Korean Zen is about. What is it? What is it? What is it? Over and over and over. Don't know. Don't know. Don't know. Just look. What is it? Yeah. And it's a beautiful practice. I do love to be in that place. I do like to learn things as though I don't know anything about them, as though I've never heard anything about it. Sometimes my ego gets in the way of that because I'm frequently placed in situations where any of the knowledge or work or effort that I put towards learning something seems to just be completely dismissed and thrown away by the people that I'm around or by the work environment that I'm in. And I think too, if you're someone who's willing to take that perspective and really hold it, people can think that you're dumb. They think sometimes that I really think that happens. They'll think I don't know what I'm really doing, or that I'm kind of stupider than I look, or as stupid as I look, perhaps. And so, yeah, it can be a problem. But it also is a gift because it means when I have to, let me tell you, I will come out of a place. I'll come out like a fireball. If I have to, and I get like that, especially if someone questions my intent. If I've done everything possible to offer the purest possible perspective, and then my intent is questioned, that is when I will most be likely to come out like a fireball. Yeah, but only under certain circumstances. I mean, that's where this, that's where this 10 of staffs comes in because, know your limits, right? Know your limits. If you're going to play with this, this is how you're going to roll, know your limits. Otherwise, you know what? You're going to end up burdened. You're going to end up feeling overwhelmed. You're going to have to step down. You're going to have to step back. You're going to have to step off, step aside, whatever the case may be. So shed anything you don't need for that journey so that that heart can stay focused on purity. And that is, I believe, Mott. Wow, talk about a full circle, right? Justice. Oh my God, I only just realized as I'm sitting here talking about this. This is incredible. I couldn't come up with this. There's no way I could invent this. But that's it. The heart will not stay focused like that unless you shed all the unnecessary bullshit stuff. That's all ego, right? I have to take this on. I have to do this. I said I'd this. Let it alone. Stop. Your heart won't stay pure unless you pick up only what's necessary. You have 2 hands. You don't have 10 hands. So that's, yeah. Walk that path. But don't take on more than you can. Yeah, wow. Well, this one kicked my ass today. And in the best kind of way. I mean, it really put things in perspective in a way that I would not, again, I'm doing my best to overcome my conditioning, and my conditioning tells me that creativity is to do with art. How small is that? How small? Or that creativity is about cooking or the way that you decorate your home or, that is the conditioning that comes into my mind from which I am operating. And that is not the real power that creativity comes from and the real power that it is can be used for. I mean, here I am sitting thinking, wow, before I started this one today, oh, I really don't do as much with my artwork as I used to, and I feel like I'm just creatively stagnant. What a load of bullshit. That's not true at all. And this deck and its energy, and I'm telling you, this one, if I said that the Hoodoo Tarot comes with an energy all its own, this one is unbelievable, the kind of energy and space it holds. And it is, I mean, I get every time I do a reading with this deck, I come out with something unbelievable. And it informs me in ways I would never be able to reach myself because of my conditioning. And for that, I'm so grateful for that. So, I mean, what value was just added because I had to stretch beyond my own conditioned definition of creativity. I love that. That is invaluable. Wow. So thank you again to anyone who watched this far. There will be maybe 2, maybe 3 of you at most, I'm thinking. But, if you made it this far, be sure to leave a comment to say so. I love knowing if somebody does. I don't really care, honestly, if anybody does or doesn't. It doesn't really matter. It would be great if people did, but the reality. So, and I want to thank more than anything, I thank wholeheartedly, thank you to Queen Auset and again, Veronica Rose for creating this beautiful practice and for challenging all of us to be invited, to be invited. I'm so honored and so glad I decided to accept the invitation again. So, all right. See you again tomorrow. A day late for Imani Faith.